Okay, welcome to part 2 of the T3i setup. We're going to be going over menu functions and getting this camera electronically ready to shoot. So the first video is about getting it physically ready to shoot. This is about getting it electronically ready to shoot. The first thing we're going to do is turn the camera on. I'm going to try repositioning this camera. Hopefully it doesn't go out of focus here. But here's the on-off switch. Turn that on. You got to make sure that it's on movie mode. This little wheel here, this little menu wheel, the little movie camera icon is there, and that's next to the white marker, so you know that that is engaged. Okay, I'm going to place it back here very carefully, and I'm going to make sure that it is in focus. I think it is. Okay, so now we're going to be going through the menu, and so the menu button is up here. Several different menus in here. Up on the top here you see the little the sub menus and then what kind of options they give you below, and these are our navigation buttons. We have up, down, left, right, and then the set button. And so the first one here, the only thing we're really going to check is this movie exposure. We're going to make sure that's on manual, and it is. That means that all the exposure functions are now controlled by you. So that's good. To back out, we just hit the menu button. It should take us back out to the main menu. Now this next tab here, movie recording size, I'm going to double check that. We are shooting on 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second. And it also gives us an indication of how much footage we have on an SD card. And in this case, almost 30 minutes. And to change that, if I wanted to change it, I don't, but if I wanted to, there's a shuttle wheel up here near the on-off switch, and so I just move that from left to right. But when I'm settled on a choice, I hit the set button, and it takes me back to the menu, and I confirm that that's the case. Sound recording, there's an internal microphone on the Canon T3i, and you can see that it's picking up my voice, so you see the levels are there. That's the most important thing when recording single system on a simple camera like this, is that if you are using the onboard microphone, just want to make sure that you're getting levels. I always leave it on auto. That way I just don't really have to worry about it. And it does a pretty good job of adjusting. As you can see, it's not peaking. Even if I, get a little loud, it, kind of adjusts. Now, if I'm going to attach, say, a Rode video microphone to this using the cold shoe attachment, I do want to make sure that that's plugged into the mic thing there. That's going to be a different video. And I do want to make sure that that mic is on. If for some reason I'm not seeing levels and I have a mic attached, that might mean that the mic's not on and it's not delivering a signal, or the battery's dead, or there's something wrong with the microphone, or there's something wrong with the camera, or maybe somebody left it on manual and just brought the levels down all the way. But this is ready to go. Okay, moving on to the next one. We're not going to cover all the different menu functions in here. It's not necessary. Picture style. We're going to make sure it is set to neutral. That gives you, the camera, the most neutral orientation when it comes to color and exposure. We don't want to bake in a particular sort of color bias or exposure bias or contrast bias in this. We want something that is as neutral as possible, as neutral as Canon basic DSLR videography allows. And that allows what we shoot to be as neutrally rendered as possible. Okay, move on to the next one here. Next one. And we don't really need anything until we get to this first wrench icon here. And this is the format function. So if I want to format my card, I can go ahead and do that. So you can see the card's almost empty anyway. So now I got a nice clean card to work with. And to back out of the menu, I just hit the menu button, and it takes me back to the shooting interface. Okay, a couple of other stops we're going to do. We just got to make sure that this might be a little bit difficult to see. We'll try to do it the best we can, but setting exposure is our next step. And to do that, there's 3 different ways of regulating exposure on a camera, 3 different functions that interact with each other. One is ISO, and that's how sensitive the camera is to light. So you're setting the sensitivity of the image sensor to light, much like taking a particular microphone and, say, cranking up the gain. That's the analog to this. And to set the ISO, we have standard numbers like 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600. You see that they double. And so double means it's twice as sensitive. With each increment that it goes higher, it's twice as sensitive to light. So good ISOs, like if you're shooting outside, you don't need a high ISO. It might be an ISO 100. If you're shooting night exteriors or interiors, it might be at 1600. If you're shooting, you know, interiors, 400 or 800, or lit interiors, I usually park it around 800. Again, there's an ISO button that you press, and then you use your shuttle wheel, and you select, and then you can just leave it, and then it wherever you're parked, when it times out, that's the ISO that it gives you. So I'm going to put this on 800. I definitely don't like to go over 1600 unless there's a really good reason for it, because when you crank the ISO too much, you're introducing a lot of visual noise into the camera, because it's really trying hard to you know, super sensitive to light. And so just like on a microphone or a sound recording system, when you crank the gain, you hear that noise come in. That's a visual analog to that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our shutter angle. This is so hard to say. Shutter angle. And I'm going to post a video that explains the shutter angle. Basically, it's a carryover from the film world, and it's also something that is more something that still photographers deal with from situation to situation. Ours is going to be a set it and forget it shutter angle. We're shooting at 24 frames per second, which is the North American standard for film production, and our shutter angle or shutter speed should always be roughly double. So we're 24 frames per second. We're going to look for something around 50, and you can see this tiny little number here. I don't have a close-up of it. I'm shooting by myself, so it's a little awkward, but over here you'll see this little 50, and to change it, it's just this shuttle wheel up here near the ISO button. And if I move that, I can really crank it, or I can bring it down, but we want it at 50 and then set it and forget it. So we're at ISO 800, we're at shutter angle 50. The next control that we have that we're going to change from shot to shot is our aperture. And that is aperture traditionally is a physical opening of the lens, like a circle, like, you know, like an iris in our eyes. Opens and closes, allows more or less light in to hit the image sensor. This is an electronic aperture, so it's a little bit different, but it's carried over from the actual physical things. And we'll show you a lens that actually has physical aperture in the Canon 6D DSLR video. So to change the aperture, we hold down this little AV button here, and we use our wheel up here, and we change our aperture. This right now is on an f4, and so that's relatively open. In fact, that's as far open as this camera will go when it's shooting all the way wide angle lens. But we can also close it down if we'd like to, if we want to get that image darker. So the higher the number, the more closed down it is, the less light it's letting in. The lower the number, the more open it is, and the more light it's letting in. So low light conditions, we're going to be at an f4, and if we're outside, we're going to be closing down in order to not overexpose the image. Typically, we want to be somewhere in the middle. We want to be somewhere between a 5, 6, and an 8, maybe up to an 11. So there's different things that we can do by restricting light or providing more light that kind of gets us to that sweet spot in the aperture. Traditionally, it's been toward the middle of the lens. But right now, we are on an let's set it to an f8. There we go. We're at 50, f8, and ISO 800. The last thing we're going to do is set our white balance. White balance is adjusting the camera's image sensor to be neutral to a particular type of light. So all light produces different colors because it's on the visible light spectrum. So tungsten light is more in the yellow-orange range, daylight is more into the blue range, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is this has certain presets that render the image as neutral as possible, so that whites appear white essentially, and they're not tinted yellow or tinted blue or tinted red or tinted green. So we hold down this little Q button here, and it takes us right to this icon right there, which is a little light icon. So if I hit the select button, it offers different presets like tungsten light, cloudy exterior, shade exterior, sunny exterior, and there's an auto white balance as well. Since I'm shooting under my desk lamps here, which are fluorescent, I'm going to put it on white fluorescent light. I'm going to hit set, and that should be good. And then there's nothing you need to do to take this menu off, just a few seconds, and then it'll time out. There we go, good. So now this camera is basically ready to shoot. We've set everything in the menu. We've set the ISO, we've set the shutter speed or angle, and then we've also set the aperture and the white balance. So electronically, this camera is ready to shoot.